Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. We're here to answer your questions for as long as you ask questions. A handful of us here today. We had a really big day yesterday. I think everybody's still hungover. But we'll answer your questions as long as you keep asking them. If you have questions and you're not in Makana, of course, you can ask questions with Office Hours. Ask officehours.global. And let's go ahead and jump into those. I don't know if we have anybody ready to answer the questions. Are you ready, Courtney?
I'm the reader today. They forgot to put it in there. All right, first question up is from Jacob Goodnight in Indianapolis, Indiana. He says, what modem router combo would you suggest for a backup ISP, considering that Wi-Fi isn't needed and advanced features offered by Ubiquiti UDM Pro and similar are not a priority?
Well, I guess the question, Jacob, is, are you talking about it being a router? Like, are you trying to do a fallover? Because if you're doing a fallover, then you need something that's going to be able to take in two internet connections and do a fallover to it. So if that's what you're trying to do, I'm going to assume that for now. There's a couple different, PepWave is one solution. Obviously, Ubiquiti has some solutions that don't have Wi-Fi. Meraki is another solution. Those are kind of like a couple of those there, but those might be some of the options there. But I think that I don't know of a modem router combo. I would keep your modem separate from your router. Now you'll get modems and they'll have a small amount of routing, but if it's a modem, it's not going to have a primary and a backup. But a lot of your modems will have 2 or 3 outputs if that's what you're looking for, to be available. I don't have any. If you're looking for just a modem with 2 or 3 Ethernets, the surf boards are the ones that I use. Next question.
Okay, next question is from John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. Here's another proposed merger in the creative software space. Canva wants to acquire the Affinity Creative Group, Affinity Photo, designer, and publisher. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I think it makes a lot of sense for both of them. I think that merger. It's hardly has any kind of antitrust issues. They're pretty small. Canva's much bigger. Canva's been very successful. I think that one of the things that makes Canva special is its ability to lots and lots of templates. They've made it very easy to create content. And so I think that having the other tools that you need to create content makes a ton of sense for Canva. And I think Affinity has probably gotten about as big as it can get on its own. So I think that it's a great merger. I hadn't heard of it until you said it, but I think it's a good idea for both of them. Go ahead, Courtney.
Do you think they will be merging some of those other products into Canva, or?
I think that what's more likely is that they'll make the ties a lot deeper. So by owning both companies, they can put so you'll be able to create content in those other ones and pass them over to Canva. Canva can pass things. So for instance, being able to have a photo and designer feeding Canva very seamlessly is a good thing for the user. And having Canva be able to publish back out to publisher, I think is also a good thing. So I think that I can definitely see how there doesn't take very much imagination to see how this would make both companies a lot better. So it's really, I think it'll be an interesting move. I think hopefully they'll be successful. I think it'll be good for a lot of folks. Next question.
Next one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. He says, I currently have a MOTU 624 audio interface and want to take the next step up to true small mixer and enter the Dante world. Would the Yamaha DM3D be a solid choice? Finally found one at a U.S. reseller. I guess coming back into the pipeline again.
Go ahead, Nigel.
I don't know enough about that mixer to argue. I would tell you that what I did, Douglas, for whatever that's worth, is I got the Behringer X32. I managed to get one quite cheap, a second-hand, a compact, which gave me 32 lanes to work with. The Dante card appears back in stock without paying a ridiculous price for it. I think if I was going to buy a new one, I would probably buy the rack-mounted one instead. I don't really use the faders. I actually do most of it on the PC software. And there's a great support for, at least for the Behringer, both across Stream Deck, Companion, and across the Mac operating system. So that, I think, is a good alternative too.
Yeah, I think that I will agree that with most people, the DM3D is a better mixer than the Behringer, but I'd probably get the Behringer rack as well. I have quite a few of them already. I think that as you kind of move up, if you decide you're going to go up to something else down the road, I think that those turn out to be something you can use as stage boxes. All kinds. There's other things you can use that rack mount for. I do agree with Mickey. He's at the that he would take Yamaha over Behringer any day, especially if you incorporate analog signals and A to D and D to A conversion. And I'll agree with him there. For most of the work that I do, I don't want the interface, and so it's just something I have to deal with. So that's I want it to be racked somewhere, and I think that if Yamaha made the same quality as at the same price, I think that I'd be interested in a rack version of what they did. But I think that that's the problem I have with it is I don't interface it with it that way. Next question.
Next one comes in from Austin, Texas, and Paul Wallace. He says, is there a rig that would let you mount 2 to 5 iPhones across and broadcast a panorama of windows to Zoom? I want to do this at Not a Boring Competition on Saturday and Sunday for a possible office hours, hour 2, or after hours discussion. See Discord second hour idea.
Yeah, I think that the challenge that you would have there is that it would I think that the challenge you'd have with that is that you need the field of view to be much wider to blend them together. So it's not really wide angle. You need a fisheye, and so if you could put fisheyes on your iPhones, I guess you could stitch it. But there's a lot of better ways to stitch those than iPhones. I mean, iPhones. I think that you'd be better off with GoPros that are overlapping, and then there's a variety of different. You're looking for a variety of 360 software to do that. I don't know what the current. I haven't had to stitch for a while because I kind of moved to 180 degree spherical. I moved from 360 to 180, and don't use that much anymore. I mean, I don't go 360 anymore. David Brady says he uses Jabinra Panicast and call it a day. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I wondered how you'd keep them in sync with each other. So if you're moving the camera at all, they may not.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. And you'll see movement,
coming into
and
Zoom as 4. Let's say you come into Zoom as 4 different people.
You'll have some subframe. No, I think he's trying to feed it all back into something to have something process it.
And then come in as one Zoom feed.
Yeah, and I don't know how. I just don't know how compelling that would be. Like I don't know if I think that it's going to take a lot of work. The problem with creating content sometimes is that you get so caught up in the technology. This is what we found with 360 was that you spent so much time working around the limitations of what you were doing that you really lost sense of the actual thing. And so what I started to learn was to not put so much complexity into those things. And how do we, when NextVR came out with this dual 180, we were like, they can only do 180 and everything else. And every 360 project, I kept on thinking about those dual 180s and going, well, this would be a lot simpler with one camera that I didn't have to stitch. So stitching is a really, especially with stitching with cameras that can't be gen locked, is really problematic. And David Brady says Jabra is actually and Pancast is what he recommends, and it does 180 and it's Zoom certified.
And does Zoom support? Sorry, we got some time. Does Zoom support different aspect ratios for a single screen?
I don't think so. I don't know enough about it. I mean, I think that again, the problem with 180 is that you do need a lot of resolution, more resolution than Zoom delivers. So I'm not entirely sure. We'd have to look at what that looks like. I mean, David obviously knows more about it than we do, and I'm. Let's see here if I can do this here. Let's see if I can open this up here. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we just don't know enough about it. I guess it has a couple cameras that you can stitch. You might be able to use it as pan and tilt inside of Zoom to do it. I guess what I would say is with something a week away, I would not do this. Yeah. This is something you buy, you figure out. Like I've got NAB coming in 3 weeks, and I have been building this rig for the last 3 weeks and testing it and buying little bits and bobs and testing things and figuring out why the power supply isn't working for this and everything else. And I'm hoping to be done 2 weeks ahead of time, like for the first rig, and you got the other rigs coming in as well. And so those are the kind of things, and this is based on doing shows for the last 2 years. So like I wouldn't try to do anything in a week or this weekend. Like I would take your camera and share it, and put it in there and go there, experience it, take it, just go in with your, a stabilizer, maybe a small, like a small rig or something else to play with a couple things. Maybe some extra microphones might be good. You can get some DJI wireless mics and a receiver and a couple things there that would allow you to do something low key. But I would keep your elbows in and try to figure that out first and see what this event's like, and then look for the next event or next year. Next question.
Next one comes in from New York City, and Alan Christensen. He says, I've noticed an image stabilization isn't working as expected any longer. Looks to be working while shooting, but playback isn't. iPhone 14 Pro app, build 1.2.1, lots of zeros and a 3. Current iOS. Anyone else experiencing this issue?
Yeah, the notes here said it was asking about Blackmagic Camera app. I found that the Blackmagic Camera app, I don't depend on it for stabilization. And I just don't feel like it does a very good job. And I'm not sure, I don't know if it ever did. Maybe I came in late to the stage, but every test I've had did not result as, so if I want all the control that I want, and I'm going to control the camera like a regular camera, then I use the Blackmagic Camera, and if I, the highest quality. If I want to, but I'm depending on the hardware around it to do that, not the software. If I wanted to just capture, heavy motion and so on and so forth, I have a tendency to use the Apple camera, which doesn't give me a lot of control otherwise. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, does an Apple camera, I don't have any iPhone, so I don't know from experience, use digital image stabilization, or does it have an optical image stabilization?
It has optical and digital. It's, it's a little bit of both. So it's a pretty powerful, tool. And I've, definitely seen it. The optical stabilization is really important for those listening, because if you do digital stabilization, you're going to get the artifacts of motion blur, and you can't, and that's going to make it hard for you to ever really get it right. It has this it kind of looks like, I always feel like it kind of looks like the Lord of the Rings when you put the ring on. you see motion blur going different directions, and everything's kind of stable. So, anyway, so I think that's the challenge there.
And I've noticed sometimes on those really tiny chip-based cameras that have optical image stabilization, that sometimes, because they use this little, magnetic deflection, and the lens is supported on these little springy things, and the springs can get tangled sometimes, so it can throw them off. So maybe you just need to whack it a couple of times.
Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Comes in from Jeff Cohn in Miami Beach, Florida. Any firsthand experience with Ubiquiti's VN video editor? Over the years, it's improved and often compared to CapCut, and he has a link.
I actually have to admit that I've never heard of it before. So I this is what it looks. This is the web page anyway. So it's an editor that seems to appear to work on the iOS and Mac, Windows, Google Play. So it looks like they're going cross-platform. But I haven't seen it, so we'll have to take a look at it. I'm going to save it, and that means I'll download it at some point and start to play with it a little bit. I think it's hard now because I think a lot of people, there'll definitely be people who jump around and use stuff, but once you start getting into a workflow, it starts to get harder and harder for you to do something else. Next question.
Next one comes in from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. Says, with remote productions, has anyone used NDI Bridge to control PTZ cameras, view and send out NDI sources, etc.? What are the pros and cons and best practices for this workflow?
Sorry, I was having a little trouble here trying to get back to let's see here. Sorry, I'm having a little, let's see here. So I haven't used the NDI Bridge to control PTZ cameras. For the most part, on the PTZ cameras that I use, I have to admit that I'm still using baseband for most of that, and Ethernet. We have controllers, we have a lot of things built out. I'm a little resistant to I know that we have other folks that have been on the panel in the past that are pretty excited about it. I tend to, if I have a couple little problems, I'll have weeks of meetings about it. And so I think that it definitely reduces my appetite for risk. And I think that's what we've seen. I mean, I've experimented with it a little bit, and there's been a couple, and I'm sure that I'm getting off the, I haven't experimented with enough, but when I see little glitches, in any way that it manages it, and JJ McKenna says works, test your bandwidth beforehand, and so. But in the early tests we did, we saw little glitches in some of these things, and we were just like, oh, well, that's not going to work yet. Like, we just kind of, so it's hard. I mean, when you're used to baseband and Ethernet managed, it's hard to go to something that is oftentimes a little less stable. Next question.
Next one comes in from Walt Palmer in Lewis, Delaware. Says, how does the Weather Channel transmit signals from remote locations during heavy weather events?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, it depends. It depends on where the camera is, how far away it is. Sometimes they would use microwave. Of course, that can be stifled by heavy rain. They use point-to-point microwave. If it's a lot of times, weather channels will have transmitters on high mountains nearby, and they'll have microwave links down to their studio. But these days, I think a lot of it goes via cellular connections, and or Ethernet connections. If there's a ISP nearby serving a pole nearby, they can do fiber optic or a regular ISP type transmission over cable.
Yeah, go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I think the Weather Channel, an IBM company, in case you didn't know, is really aggregates data from lots of different sources. I don't know if they have their own sources of data, but I know they use the US Oceanic and all the other surveys. I think where the Weather Channel particularly tries to add value, which is why IBM, I think, acquired it, is the analysis and the forecasting and the trending. So my guess is they get data from lots of different sources all over the world, and it's provided by all different types of communications depending where you are.
Yeah, I do know that live views are actually pretty popular with a lot of different broadcasters when it comes to weather, because it doesn't often affect the cell coverage. It does sometimes if it's heavy enough. The big one is C-band satellite. Well, a C-band satellite dish, appropriated, well set up, will cut through just about anything. Like so, KU, which is the most popular satellite uplink, is pretty susceptible to heavy rain. KA is very susceptible to fog. It doesn't really matter at that point. A cloud cover is a problem. But KU can cut through a fair bit of rain, but not the full downpour. A large C-band truck, which you can still rent. I used to rent them all the time. We used to have a KA to save money and a C-band backup. So the two of those for bigger events that we did were pretty useful. And this is what ESPN. If you ever go up there and to their space, you'll see all these huge C-band uplinks, massive satellite dishes that generally can withstand almost anything short of a hurricane. It takes a lot to take a C-band. It's just a very long wavelength that can go through an awful lot of weather. Go ahead, Courtney.
Sorry, clicked. Nothing happened. I thought they were asking about stationary cameras, because a lot of the static cameras that sit on the top of mountains or on the top in certain cities or on beaches, etc. I didn't think about rolling a satellite truck for a report for the reporter locally. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
they all use satellite. Yeah.
Yeah, and the KU trucks can get very small, as Mickey pointed out. We see those come in Suburbans, like that. It can swing up. It's a pretty compact thing. The C-bands they're big trucks. You need clearance. You can't put them in a parking lot. With the low, they're big pieces of machinery, but they work well. I was brought in one a while ago for a campaign that was having trouble having their live streams work, and suddenly it all worked. And the reason was I just brought a bunch of C-bands in. I was just like, we're gonna stop having bandwidth problems. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas says OpenAI announced that they will be rolling out AI voices and speech. Will this motivate Apple to buff up Siri?
Go ahead, Nigel.
First of all, I'd like Apple to buff up their iPad line. I'm still waiting. I was away for a week, expected to come back and find there was a whole new iPad line, and they seem to be very reticent on that. Courtney and I were joking just before. And next Monday is April the 1st. I try to avoid announcing products on April the 1st. So I don't know what that does to their product schedule. But to Siri, I think Apple will make the next WWDC about AI. I think it'll be a huge challenge if it doesn't. My guess is they've been spending money on this. We know they've been acquiring companies. They've been working it. I think the trick for Apple is not to try and compete with OpenAI and all those people. It's to find a place where they can use AI to improve and enhance the user experience. And I think that will become the most interesting thing. How do they net add? I don't know they're going to do everything with AI branding. My guess is they probably won't. But I think they're already starting to say, well, we manufacture with it and we do research with it. I think the question is, how do they expand the experience for the user? But Siri does need a brush up and a clean up, and I think they are going to have to declare how they want to use Siri going forward and where it fits in that model. So I expect you'll hear quite a lot.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, I just wonder if they're going to let you program it with the voice of your choice and then have her respond with the voice of your significant other. So you can go, yes, dear, I'm getting it. Yeah. Can you route my phone calls to my cell? Thank you.
Switch it over to iNag.
iNag,
You still haven't cleaned your car.
New iNag from Apple.
Yeah, exactly. I think that there's been some talk that Apple's talking to Google about possibly using some of their AI. I think that what's interesting is that there always becomes a problem with a large company, and this isn't just a problem for Apple, is branding. And I think Apple's need to make sure that they maintain security and that they don't have a lot of issues, hallucinations and everything else has really limited what they're willing to do. Because they'd rather do it well than do it at all, and so they. So I think that's the real issue that Apple has. I think that there's probably a potential for what we would tend to refer to as some kind of federated solution, which is basically, I think Apple can allow you to interrogate everything on your phone with its own AI, using something that probably is related to Stable Diffusion, but not necessarily that. They got some smart people. They could probably come up with something in that realm. But the idea is that it can look at any document or anything that you have on your phone. So you can say, instead of the really bad search in mail, you could say, I wrote an email in 2015 that was to Nigel, and it was about booths. Can you show me that email? And it would just give you all the email. Like it would go find that for you. You could have natural language and make searches. Or I have a document. I've got this document. Tell me about give me the 5 points that this document, 5 points about this document. It doesn't have to search everything in the world. It can look at those things and interrogate them. And I think that is really powerful. And it could all be local, on the phone. And then, when you do a search, it says, would you like me to use Google or whatever? Or, the same way that Apple has basically set search off to Google for everything else. It's a natural thing for them to extend that support to Gemini or whatever Google's working on. So I think that Apple can do, and it's really kind of the best of both worlds. You've got some privacy, you've got, and Apple's already been doing, a lot of machine learning, as they call it, with a lot of these bits and pieces. I don't think that anything that OpenAI, and to be honest with you, anybody else really presses down on Apple very much. They don't really, I've, had interactions, with folks at Apple for a long time, 25 years. In the beginning, up until about they paid a lot of attention to the market, probably until about 2015 or so. And after that, they just pay attention to what they want to do. They've been a little like that always, but they don't really worry about what other people are doing or what other people are thinking. They have their own plan and they're kind of working through it. They do look at things that are cool on the outside world and go, let's think about how to do that. But they're not in any rush to do anything dramatic. I don't think that they feel like they have to catch up with anybody. And I think that's they kind of move at the pace that they're going to move at, and they try to think of the right way to get it done. And I think that they have the luxury of doing that, given that they're one of the largest companies in the world and revenue is pretty regular. And so I think but I think that they're more there's not any rush. You very rarely see Apple rush something out. I mean, even when we look at I think people had the impression that Apple rushed USB-C out to the European Union. I think it was more that Apple persuaded the European Union to slow down enough that they got to the timeline that Apple already had. So like I don't think that it was really. I don't think they've been rushing around. I think that when you see them rush with like the laws that happen in the EU, you can see how messy, how not good Apple is at it. When they have to rush something out or do something in a couple months, you can see how messy it is because they're not very good at it. They start here and then stop there and start here and stop there. It's just not a muscle that they have developed. So I don't think there's any pivoting going on. Next question.
Next one comes in from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. Says, I'm looking at switching to the Blackmagic Design Web Presenter HD. I'd like to send a signal from a camera switcher and use a hardware encoder rather than my streaming software. What does the panel think of this workflow?
I think that a lot of us have concerns that that the problems with Black Crush inside of that we've seen in Zoom are happening everywhere. For Blackmagic, and that you may see the blacks get pushed a little hard. It's just that we don't know if they can actually fix that. So I'd be a little concerned about using it as my primary streamer. The one that there's what we're using for this show are the Osprey Talons. There is a Amazon version of those as well. That's the UHD link, and there's also a smaller Amazon link. For a lot of our shows, I think that that we found that the link is really effective because of the fact that it's it does cost you money. So running something every day for 2 hours started to add up for us, which is why we're using the Osprey Talent. But I think that the other side of it is that it's a really stable solution. And if you're doing this and, it's got the 6C and a bunch of things we'll talk about in the next question, but I think that I would probably lean towards that. There's a lot of other hardware. High Vision makes some great hardware to it. I do almost every show that I do that I get paid for, I use a hardware encoder. Like I don't use software to encode things that matter. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was wondering, I have an original web presenter, but not the most recent one. When it first came out, I had it. It was the one that could switch between HDMI and SDI locally on it, but it did only supported a single stream. Is the new one capable of streaming to multiple surfaces at the same time?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just one. I will say that the interface for the presenter is the best ever. Like it's better than anybody else's interface. I just wish the quality of the signal was a little higher. So that's the concern that I have with the web presenter. I think that as something as like basic business stuff that doesn't matter as much, you could probably use it. But I think that I would be a little concerned about anything that people are going to pick at because of the black level problem. Next question.
Next one comes in from Funsak Darji in Dharamshala, India. It says, greeting panelists. Congratulations on turning 4 last week. It was actually yesterday. I'm thankful for all the good questions and the answers here. Which encoder will be good to use with a 2ME Constellation HD?
So that's why I was going to stop completely answering the last question because I knew it would be the same as this question. I actually know some folks that do some streaming in the same city that you have, that you're in. And how about that? To know 2 different people doing encoding or 2 different groups of people doing encoding in the same country in India, in the same city. So I know that one of the things in India is that there's a lot of challenges with, just bandwidth staying stable in remote areas. And one of the things that Zixi is really good at is traversing that. And so I would really think about if I was streaming, again, if you're doing something every day like we do, it gets a little expensive. But if you're doing it for a show after show after show, it's not particularly expensive. It costs you a couple dollars an hour to run something like an Elemental link. That link that Zixi, an Elemental, it is not the same as the original piece of hardware. Same as the UHD link is not the same as the Talon. They have Amazon has added other features. AWS added other features to both of these that make them both more stable, higher quality, more features like more channels and so on and so forth. But I think that you may want to look at the Elemental link for those, because they're really just you can run them from anywhere. They are turnkey, and you get into AWS and you can send it to as many places as you want. You don't have to have. You can have one encode in a relatively unstable location, and still get a bunch of encodes back out of it somewhere else, as many as you need to. And you can, I think that the link supports up to 8 channels of, the little link does up to 8 channels of audio, the larger one, 16 channels of audio. And what that's useful for is languaging. So you can have stereo on the first 2 channels and then another 6 languages that you add to it, and then split those up in AWS in the cloud. And that can be really, really useful for that. So something to think about. Next question.
Next one comes in from the great Pacific Northwest, Zach Jeffries. Anybody use Rivet for SRT and NDI Dante in point-to-point scenarios? I'm thinking this could be a great way to do remote ingest and or remote monitoring.
Yeah, I have not used Rivet. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
I was just trying to see what it cost. I went to their website. I have not used Rivet either. This is what it looks like. It's a software device. It is cross-platform, works with iOS, Apple, Windows, and Android. So covers all the bases there and allows you to stream from anywhere. But I haven't seen what their pricing scenario is. So I was wondering if you knew that.
I don't know it. Yeah, so I haven't used it. We'll take a look at it. We are looking at really. We're really excited about NAB to see anything new around Dante and other things that are along. I think that we're going to see. I think we're going to see a lot of new things in all of those areas. SRT, NDI, Dante. I think we're going to see updates to all of those things at NAB, and I think it's going to be really exciting to see how those things progress.
Rivet does have a free trial, so if you want to try it out, you can try it out on any of those packages and see if you're successful in getting it from one operating system to another.
Next question.
From Leon in Vienna. Zoom made a ton of announcements yesterday, including a UI and Unreal Engine support in the panel analysis.
Yeah, so Zoom did have a huge update yesterday. So we missed it because I think it got lost in the 4th anniversary of our 4th anniversary show. But basically, it's probably the largest upgrade to Zoom probably since the pandemic. So it is really, there's a lot of new interfaces that have been added, a lot of control. So if you're building shows all inside of Zoom, the new Zoom event, it's not Zoom Events, but it is. It is definitely changing a lot of what you have, of what's possible. One of the things that I'm really excited about is we've already seen some of this come out, the ability to control, or to interrogate and control remote participants. That wasn't part of the Monday announcement, but that happened a couple weeks ago, and we're hoping to start to incorporate that more into our show here. So that's been. That was exciting. The thing I will admit that I'm the most excited about is the Unreal integration. So this is what we were kind of hinting towards earlier, but we're really excited to use. We're hoping to use Unreal for, and Nick Justison's going to be working with us to use Unreal at the booth. So we're going to have the Unreal windows, and what it does is it really lets you build an entirely different look. I think combined with a lot of the new Unreal tools, especially when you think about digital first events of being able to take over screens, the ability to bring live participants in and incorporate them into a larger environment, I think is really exciting. And so I think that the Unreal Engine direct support is going to be something that we're really interested in playing with, and we're really excited that Nick Justison is his class schedule is going to be more flexible and he'll be on the show more often. So you're going to see a lot of Unreal coverage, and we will be talking about these tools very, very soon. So stay tuned. Next question.
Next one comes in from Robert Shoji in Los Angeles. He says, is there a digital IMAX camera that is equal in quality to the 1570 IMAX film format?
Good, Courtney.
Well, I think the closest one, and the one that they seem to be using for digital IMAX is the Alexa 65, which is one of the better sensors. It is not the IMAX format, which is a more square format. This is a very wide sensor you can see there on the Alexa, this was the camera that they used to shoot most of Dune 2 with, which was then converted for IMAX into their dual 4K projector, IMAX Digital, which is they have two 4K projectors that are offset by a half pixel to give you a higher resolution in the theaters. But they acquire things in something like the Alexa 65 and similar high-resolution cameras. Digital.
Yeah, I think the Electra 65 is still significantly less than the approximate 8K, 18K that would be suffice to really replace the 1570 format. That IMAX uses. So it's still a lot more resolution there. The closest camera that we've seen that can capture at that resolution is the Sphere camera. So the Sphere camera is capturing at the same resolution, has a very wide angle lens. But if you took that wide angle lens on and put a film lens on it, you'd be very close to the same format as an IMAX. So I think a lot of us think that something around the Sphere camera. The problem is it takes a small army to run the Sphere camera. I mean, the IMAX is pretty loud too. If you ever heard, you're not going to take any dialogue from a show that has an IMAX camera running in it. But the 1570 is amazing. I think the hard part is that it's hard to shoot. I think that a digital camera would make a huge difference. The real challenge is there's not that many. There's only probably 30 or 40
30 screens worldwide.
Screens. I think there's only 10 or 15. There's 10 or 15 in the United States. So it's I know we have one in San Francisco, and Dune was sold out for all the good seats. The 15 in the middle. All those seats were sold out the first day. I think probably the first hour. Of that it was out there, because I looked at it and I was like, oh, maybe I'll go see a 1570 film. And then after that, I was like, oh, I'd probably watch it at home because I can't get any tickets. So anyway, I think that that's the real challenge, is distribution. It would be interesting to see if you could digitally distribute it as well. And right now that doesn't happen. So these film reels are massive. They are the size of a large wagon wheel, and the film itself is about 3 inches wide. So it's pretty big. Yeah, go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, we have two in Texas, none of which are in Austin. But what we do have in Austin is a D3 digital theater at the local museum. How good is that compared to the print format?
I think that it is it's not the same as IMAX. As far as the 15, if we're comparing to 1570, it's not going to be the same resolution. I think that most of them are at a 4K 24p resolution. I mean, that's usually what you're seeing is 4K. So a lot of the DCPs run at 4K. There are actually some projectors in a lot of different formats that are still doing 1080p. You'd be surprised at how little. Film was actually really soft. So one of the things that I've noticed, especially watching movies in the Apple Vision Pro, is that I can really see the grain actually in the Vision Pro better than I have seen it in a lot of other formats. And we have to remember that typically when we watched film up until it became digital over the last really 15 years, that it was a third to a fifth generation from the original print. So the original was then copied to a couple, and then they were copied to a couple, and then they were copied. That's the only way you can make 1,500 prints without them, without destroying the original. And so the original then is put in a nice little pack, and then it's put into a room, and hopefully they don't have a fire, which they did at one point and lost a bunch of stuff. So, so you're looking at third, and we paid a lot of attention to that at Lucasfilm because rendering at the time was expensive, very expensive to do. So we paid attention to what resolution do we actually have to render so that it looks okay. And so the film up until about 15 years ago was the resolution of the film was higher, but the effective resolution of film was significantly lower than 1920 by 1080. So what you saw in the theater up until we moved to digital, until we moved to 4K, which was really only the last 8 to 10 years, what you saw in the theater was closer to 1700 by 700. Like that was the rough resolution of what you're actually seeing after you have generation loss. So digital has changed all of that because, but at 1080p, you really are still getting the resolution, the effective resolution that film was 15 years ago. 4K, of course, gets a lot sharper. And the problem is, if you rendered things at the resolution that you could get away with, if you go to 4K now, you can see it in what you watch the digital 4K of Dolby did a re-release of The Matrix, and when you watch that, you can see every digital shot got soft because the film was able to be rescanned at the full resolution, and the digital shots were the digital shots. So you could see that shift back and forth because that it didn't stand up. So anyway, so I think that those, but there's not a lot of projectors. Christie and Barco both make 8K projectors. I don't know of very many places that are using those yet because there's nothing to use them on. And I think a lot of people are unclear about whether 8K would matter to a projection, to an LCD, to an LED wall, which Courtney and I saw in the 8K would matter because it can represent every pixel. But I don't think it necessarily makes the same impact at when it's projected. There's just a lot of softness that goes on there. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, what most of the IMAX digital IMAX cinemas use is 2 4K projectors. Like I said, that they use them for when it's IMAX 3D, they use them 4K each eye. And when it's not 3D, they use the two of them with the same DCI file being projected, 4K file, and they just offset them by half a pixel on the screen so it smooths out. You don't see the pixels as much. So it gives you an effective 8K, but you don't capture in 8K. The files are only in 4K, so you don't have that original resolution to deal with.
Next question.
Next one comes in from Kyle Hammond in Chicago, Illinois. He says, I believe Alex said his iPhone 15 rig is only for recording, but would it be possible, or even if not preferred, to use that rig as a live feed?
You absolutely can use it as a live feed. So I'm designing it for both. I mean, it is primarily a capture rig, but it's definitely going to be designed to use is to use it as a live rig. We've got we're hoping to test some software that's coming out that is going to allow us to do a pretty high resolution stream to YouTube. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, it's coming together. The update right now is that I cannot power this little Zato. I can't power it with, you have to use a battery for it. Like I can't power it off of a portable rig. It took me a little while to realize why I wasn't getting any signal from it. But anyway, but almost everything else is kind of starting to get into place. I think that a lot of my work right now is getting the right cables, the right length of cables with the right, ends and all the little bits and pieces. So cabling has become like this little Tetris thing of trying to get all the cables into where they need to be to make it relatively convenient. And then I'm also trying to just push the envelope of it. So I'm trying to get some separate power from for the electrosonics and a bunch of other things, little things like that. But anyway, so that's what we're working on now. Next question.
Next one comes in from our friend David Brady. He was here yesterday in New York City. He says, I'm looking for some right and left angle adapters for a number of plug types, USB-C, Power Delivvery, 7.4 millimeter barrel for a Dell laptop. Are these commonplace, and are there any good resources?
I have to admit, almost all the ones that I'm buying right now are off of Amazon. They come the next day. I think that the other places to look are Monoprice and CableMatters.com. A lot of those things end up in Amazon as well. But those are the three places that I've been looking for cables, and I'm doing the same thing where I'm looking for lots of different barrels and mostly USB-C solutions. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to say I bought a lot of these USB-C, and I've also found them in HDMI. These right angles. The nice thing about USB-C, you don't have to have a right or a left angle because you can flip them over. So that a right angle can work as a left angle as well in USB-C. And they're fairly cheap on Amazon and come the next day. And I also use them for HDMI to keep a low profile on a monitor that is mounted on a camera so it's not sticking out at a right angle and getting knocked. So they do make them in both in HDMI minis and HDMI full size. I haven't found any Dell laptop because Dell has that custom barrel connector. It's not a standard 5.1. It's a double coax. And so you probably are going to have to get that from Dell if anybody makes it. I have not seen anybody that makes a right angle, but look around. There might be a Chinese supplier somewhere you can find on eBay that does that.
Next question.
Next one from Douglas Carmichael. He says, NBC Sports and the Chicago Blackhawks are teaming up for an animated hockey game on April the 6th, controlled by puck player and optical tracking data. How do you send multiple streams of tracking data into Unreal or Unity?
I don't know how they're doing this, so I'm going to say that ahead of time. But what we would do with those things is a lot of times now. I mean, you can put actual markers on the players and on the puck. The pucks often they now can have their own data inside the puck that allows you to track it. But a lot of it is you can put trackers, and those trackers can be kind of woven into the uniforms. The problem is the uniforms move against the players. My guess is that they are going to probably use a lot of cameras and use the optical tracking. In my guesstimation is they're going to optically track the players, and they are going to process all of those pixels and turn them into 3D characters. And they're already doing. The NFL's doing this right now. So I think that. That's probably what they're going to try to do. I don't know how compelling it's going to be, but you got to start somewhere. So I think that there's a little bit of a we got to do test it, push it, see what happens. So I think that that's probably what's happening here. It'll be interesting to see. We'll take a look at it. Next question.
Next one comes in from Marilee Zusha Miera in Weeblo. What is fallover? And how do you protect your shows from it? Well, not necessarily from it. There have been some very public fails and shows from this, so it seems very important to avoid daring one with a big public figure and a sandbag.
There's a saying that I think is important here from because there's a couple of things that live streaming is by no means at any level compared to the military. But there's military terms that oftentimes become useful for live streaming. And there's one by General Omar Bradley that says, amateurs talk about strategy and professionals talk about logistics. And I have a friend of mine who was he was in airborne, and then he went to Delta, and then he went back to airborne. And he said, it's when we were talking about the differences, and he goes, when you're Delta, you're a small team. You wander off and you do what you're going to do. He goes, when you're in the Army, he goes, there's supply trains, there's latrines, there's food, there's water, there's a whole different. They're entirely different. You can't, like when people say you can only have one or the other, you can't. The reason I bring that up is that one of the things that is really important about live events is logistics, and that you have to have a backup, and the backup to the backup, and the backup to that backup, especially when it gets large. You have to. We had a very high profile first lady in South Africa, and I told the folks that were there. This is an example. I told the folks there that your wireless is going to stop working when Secret Service shows up. I just need you to know that. Your wireless will stop working. And they were like, "Oh, we don't." I said the Axions are the only thing that'll work there, and they didn't believe me, and they Sennheisers, and it was fine. And I very carefully put an SM58 with a cable behind where that person was going to sit. I had we tested it. Everyone was pretty begrudging about the whole test because it was wasting time that they needed for something else, and of course their wireless was going to work. And if you watch the show, she's using the wired SM58. And so the thing is that, your backup shoots are only backup shoots if you've tested them and you know that they're going to work. A lot of times people will kind of nod their head towards backups, but not really take them seriously. And you have to take them seriously. The other thing you have to look at is oftentimes the failure that you have is not necessarily, it fails, but there wasn't anything necessarily wrong with it or it's something that you couldn't handle. It was something else. And what we call that is a cascading failure. So what happens is that you don't have enough resources. You don't have enough people. You're running at, this is when I talk about, you want everything running at 40 to 60%. So, it's opulent to run it under 40% for an event, because, you're now putting a ton of resources and paying for those resources that don't make any sense. It is risky to go over 60%. And I mean that by the time that you give yourself to set up, the crew that you choose, the hardware that you choose, everything is everything should be running not more than 60% capacity. And then your clients will complain that people are sitting around and there's a lot of extra hardware and everything else. And you need that so that when things go wrong, you can continue to respond to those things without going over 100%. Once you go over 100%, people start making mistakes, things start to break, and you end up with something breaking over here that affects something over there. And that's, those cascading failures are really hard to get around. And we've seen it in the Super Bowl, so these kinds of things can happen at the highest levels. But that's the thing, it's usually not giving yourself enough headroom and not having enough logistics and, not having people experienced enough to know, what they need to do there. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, there's failover, which is Apple, which Alex just explained, eloquently as to how to back yourself up in case of something failing. I'm not sure if this question was based on that or fallover, which is how it was worded with tongue in cheek, perhaps meaning that there was somebody who tripped, a very famous political person who tripped over a sandbag. And if that is what you're talking about, running cables and safety in putting your equipment about and visibility, I can recommend there's many types of high visibility tapes that are available. If you're running cables across any type of place where people will be walking, doorways, etc., try and run the cables over the top of the doorway so you have to deal with that. Or you can get this vinyl safety tape. Here's some that glows in the dark. So if it's a darkened stage, you might be able to see this a little bit better. And there's some reflective outdoor tape that is highly reflective. You can put it whenever you're running cables across a entryway or a passageway so that people don't trip unknowingly. And of course, there are the yellow jackets, which are those big plastic and sometimes metal cable troughs that they run across driveways and so on to carry higher current cables for lighting cables and so on. They're usually yellow. That's why they're called yellow jackets, so that they have high visibility. But people can trip over those as well. So you have to keep all that stuff in mind to avoid being sued by somebody who trips and falls off a stage with that.
Yeah, and one of the members on the Rayon mentioned, he said, I suffered that last weekend. The audio was failing, and only realized it was the speakers overheating because after some time they heat up from non-audio guy setting up the speakers for me, and that's the challenge. That is the and this comes down to for a lot of things, especially things that I don't have a lot of time for. We had to load in. We've had a couple times where we've had to load in, and I had to load into a very high security facility, and I had 45 minutes to get completely set up, and I spent a week prepping for that. So I labeled everything, I practiced it all, I made sure I had the right lengths, I made sure that everything was cabled correctly, I had little pictures that I could refer to, and I did it. But it takes a lot, but that's when you don't have enough people around you. You need to make it very clear for the people who, if you don't have everyone being skilled, you need to really kind of make sure that it's paint by numbers for them to put things together the right way. Next question.
Next question comes in from Dharamshala India and Funsak Dorji. Hi, panelists. Tim Ferriss, in his YouTube video, was interviewing Gabor Mate, I guess it's mate, and was being recorded to Zoom H6. Audio sounds great. Which mic are they using? Thanks, and gives a link.
And Mickey jumped in. He said it's an SEV7. It sounded it sounds heavily overprocessed with noise suppression and overcompressed. So it may not have sounded the same way when they recorded it. Next question.
From Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. He says, I'm not sure yet, but at first glance, the DOLA AI Calendar may be the Apple Works of calendars, or all-in-one Swiss Army knife of a calendar app that will rock my world. Am I too excited? And he has a link.
Good, Nigel.
Yes. And also, I think you should ask yourself, who is behind this? So when I share my calendar and all my personal information with DOLA, who am I sharing it with? it's not easy to see from the application. So I was having a quick play with it, and we started the interaction, and they did everything other than please give me your bank account details. So I would really need to know who this was. Now, do I think it's an interesting model? Yes. Do I think I would like Apple to be able to do something like this? Because at least for all their foibles and problems, they're probably genuinely more secure than most other things. But I don't know who this is, so I'm not ready to give them access to my world.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I've always used Google Calendar, and I use it with the Google Assistant. And so I just ask it to make an appointment, and it'll ask me all the pertinent questions: when, where, what time, what do I call it, etc. Do you want notifications turned on? It'll notify me 15 minutes before the appointment, etc. So I'm not sure what the AI does in this case, and maybe Nigel can tell me if he's played with the DOLA. Does it do anything more for you than your typical Google Assistant will do, or Amazon Assistant?
So from the minimum I've seen, because the next step for me is to give them access to my world, and I was reticent to do that, it's more conversational. Please push my meeting with Tom back 2 hours. Am I going out? It's a bit more of a talk, like you were talking to an assistant rather than talking to a computer.
Next question.
Next one comes in from Eduardo Augustine in Panama, Pennsylvania. Is there an inexpensive way to stream a drone feed without a heads-up display? RTMP seems to be the way to go, and HDMI output is too expensive with RC Pro controller.
I don't know an inexpensive way to do that. Usually you need the you need the hardware to make that work. So I don't. You'd have to give us a price point that you're trying to hit, but I think it's going to be hard to find an inexpensive way to do that output. Next question.
Next one from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. He says, some technologies say that we're on the verge of a golden age of AI, but the technology might not realize its full potential due to insufficient electricity and transformers to power the advances. How do we solve this?
I have a hard time believing we're going to run out of power. So I think this is being sold to us by people who are trying to sell power or try to sell something else. There's a lot of times people tell us that things are whatever, and you just got to look at who's saying that and why are they saying it. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, this modern penchant for this hyper-destructive view that everything's going to end the world and could be a catastrophe. I have so much more faith in humans' ability to innovate and be smart and solve problems. And every model I always see completely ignores any of the things that might make things better. We finally might work out that nuclear power is not a bad thing, but a good thing. So I have much more faith. I ignore all this stuff because I have more faith in humanity than I think the catchy headline writers.
Yeah, Courtney.
Yeah, and Paul, I think Nigel used to work for IBM, and I think Paul did too. There are advancements being made. IBM has, MOTU Research has a new chip coming out called North Pole. Yes, IBM still is around, and they're still making hardware. And the North Pole claims it's an AI-built chip that has processor and memory in little modules across the chip. And it's like 10 times more power efficient than the current NVIDIA and about 5 times as fast. So that could be a great advancement in AI systems and with less power. And that's at I think a 10 nanometer size chip. When they go down to 4 nanometers, it's going to save even more money. So and electricity power and have better density. And it doesn't need excessive cooling because of the chip design. So take a look for IBM North Pole to make some advances in the amount of current needed to do AI processing.
Next question.
From Rion Smith in Trinidad, West Indies. Do you guys know we have been hit with a geomagnetic storm? And here's a link to it.
I think that they actually say exactly. I think that you can see the aurora borealis all the way into the United States. So it's not a massive magnetic storm, but it's a pretty big one. And we should expect to see more of this year and possibly into next year. The sun is, kind of goes through a cyclical cycle of activity where you see more solar activity. And right now we have a lot of sunspots and we have a lot of activity here. We're fortunate that it's not always pointing at us. The sun is 360 degrees because some of the things that come out of the sun could probably slow down AI all the way to zero. So I think that we're fortunate that that's the case. But yeah, if you're in the northern parts of the United States, I would do a search for aurora borealis and see if you're going to actually see it in your area. Welcome back. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
All right, another one from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. He says, discuss Kevin Kelly's theory of the 1,000 true fans. Is this the updated version? This is the updated version, and he has a link there.
It's a theory. I guess my question is, has Kevin Kelly done it? So he has a theory that works in his head, and until we see it actually work in the real world, I'm hesitant to think much about it. I think that a lot of writers come up with ideas, and that's great. It gives us thoughts of things that we can try to implement. But until he executes it, I'm not that excited about it. Next question.
Can you explain what the true theory is?
No, the idea is that if you have 1,000 fans, all you need is 1,000 fans willing to, pay for whatever you're making and everything else, and you can make a living at it. It's just really hard to keep a handle on 1,000 fans staying there. So if you really serve them well, then, and I think that there have been a list of 1,000 or 10,000 or 5,000. There's a lot of different numbers that have been thrown around. But the idea is that if you can get, 1,000 fans willing to pay $200 or $300 a year for different services that you have, I'm not sure if he says that, but some amount willing to go to things and do things, I think that I think that's the theory. I don't know if he's proven it though. Like theories are theories until they're proven. Next question.
Next one comes from David Brady in New York City. He says, using the Sonatec expansion chassis, could one get around the MacBook Air dual screen limitation by installing the NVIDIA GTX 1080?
I don't think so, because I don't think that I don't think Apple and I don't think that Apple and NVIDIA work together at all. So there, this has been an issue where NVIDIA wanted to have control over the processors and Apple wanted to have control over the processors. And especially now when you have the M series, they're expecting to use all their own GPU processors. I don't think they're looking externally at all. So yeah, I don't think you'd be able to get around it. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think for the M3 hardware or M2 or M3 hardware, it doesn't support RAM DEC for more than two screens, whether it's the internal screen and an Air and one external screen or two external screens with the internal one turned off. I think it only has specs for two screens. And NVIDIA, like Alex said, they don't even have drivers for NVIDIA anymore, I don't believe.
And I think that if I was going to do that, I'd look at the Mac Mini Pro, which will support more screens, or the Studio, the bottom Studio. And those will, of course, I know that it can do, the Studio can do at least 4, because I got 4 here right now. Next question.
I think pluggable, you could use something like a pluggable, but a virtual video device.
The pluggable will let you do it.
It's not a real video card. Yeah.
It's a little scary. Yeah.
All right. From, let's see.
Supreet Singh.
Hey, sorry. I was just trying to get my eyeballs to focus.
Yeah, in Bangalore. Yep.
Bangalore, India. Mm-hmm. Says, I have 2 NIC ports on my desktop PC, 10 gig and 2.5 gig. How can I force one NIC to only handle internet traffic and the other NIC to only handle local LAN traffic? In other words, NAS, NDI, Dante, etc.
Yeah, I'm just thinking through that. I think, so Mickey pointed out VLANs and firewall rules. So that would be so you just need to, you're going to have to set all of those bits and pieces up. John Wallace says you have to segment the networks and both cards to have default gateways. So those are the things that you would need to do there. But JJ McKenna says don't put a gateway on your internal NIC. So there you go. Those are responses from our viewers. Next question.
From Rayon Smith in Trinidad, West Indies. Alex Lindsay, I use the drone controller outputting RTMP from the app and RASPI running NGINX. Ninjix?
Nginx, I think.
Nginx, and the same network with a low buffer time to capture drone video to my ATEM from a Raspberry Pi HDMI out. That sounds like a solution.
I think you need a second hour.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that work. So, reach out to us. We'll give you a second hour to talk about that. I'd love to see how that works. That looks really, really like an interesting solution. Absolutely. Next question.
Another one from Rayon Smith in Trinidad, West Indies. Can you suggest 2 or 3 books or podcasts or websites someone can start down the road to becoming as proficient in multimedia as you guys have become? Yes, doing is the best, but any literature sources to help?
I think the real challenge is that most of us learned it by doing it, and there aren't most of us that are doing it. It's really hard for us to get around to writing about it. So, I don't find that there's a lot of texts that really represent what we're trying to get done. And so that's when we're hesitant to it, it's not like, oh, you should just do it and not read it. There's just not that many good reading materials out there to do that. I keep on threatening to do more content around this. It's just a matter of, figuring that out. Go ahead, Courtney.
And these days, with so much equipment out there, so many different types of cameras, so many different types of modems and transmission and Ethernet, and it's just there's no one perfect way to do everything. So finding a book or even a podcast that shows you one way to do it may not be the best way to do it. So you really have to experiment a lot and find some suggestions and follow those. But a lot of times it's happenstance that you stumble across something that isn't even in the books.
Yeah, I mean, even this iPhone rig that I'm working on, it's been me watching a lot of videos, looking at what other people are using, and then fiddling with things and experimenting with them, and then doing. There's not a book to read about it, and so I think that's the real challenge is if you're really busy, don't worry about it because you're doing work. If you're not busy, stay busy. Go out there and do stuff for whether it's nonprofits or other organizations to try to kind of help move that forward. But I think that doing it, and again, one of the reasons that we're here doing office hours is to have people out there experimenting and then asking questions as they go. Next question.
Next one comes in from Comox, British Columbia. It says, with so much from Roz Humphreys, with so much equipment being discussed, is there a favorite equipment resale place? I'm not looking to purchase a specific piece at the moment, but generally interested.
I think it depends on what you're trying to buy. I don't think that there's one place. I know a lot of folks buy audio stuff from Reverb. Reverb is a website that is that makes that available. I think that B&H has its own resale. eBay, of course, is really popular. But those are the big three that I look at. I have to admit, I don't buy a lot of used electronics because I know how people treat them, and so I have a tendency to want to buy new stuff all the time because it's really hard to find. There are a handful of things like our BSS 806, but I just know that the ownership of that is going to probably be something where it's sitting in a server room the whole time, not being carried around, and so that's something to think about. Go to Courtney.
Yeah, I mean, you can look around for electronics auctions. A lot of times there are companies that go out of business and they will sell off their equipment in an auction at bargain basement prices. I'd be very careful there because you never know exactly what you're going to get. But a lot of times you can buy a lot of a whole lot of stuff for a fixed price and then sort it out. You may have to resell some of it that you don't need later. If you're just looking for consumer type equipment, look on the websites of the manufacturers, because the manufacturers have lots of B stock, which is their returns that are factory refurbished. So Apple has refurbished website sales on their website. Also, Dell and a number of the other manufacturers, Canon, you can probably find refurbished units at any of those manufacturers' websites, and they sell them for a significant discount from the retail price, and they do carry the full factory warranty on the factory refurbs. And a lot of them are just people bought them and didn't read the instruction manual and said, this doesn't work for me, and they send it back, and there's really nothing wrong with it. But they cannot sell it. The manufacturer cannot sell it as a new item, so they have to sell it as B stock refurbed. So a lot of times you'll get perfectly brand new stuff that just people didn't know how to use.
Next question.
Next one comes in from Roz Humphreys in Comox, British Columbia. Alex, is there one or two favorite YouTubers working on iPhone regarding the rig build out?
Not really. I actually just can't even identify who they are because I'm usually just scanning through it and going, oh, that looks great. That looks great. No, I would never do that. So, but I noticed, and it's more of looking at what they're all using. So, for instance, a lot of them are using the Belkin breakout. I have to say that I got the Belkin, but then I'm now experimenting with this. This is Orico, and I'm experimenting with this one. There's a couple. So what happens is that I kind of am scanning what other people are doing, but not really. And then, if they're inexpensive enough, trying them. So the Belkin's in the system right now. The reason I'm experimenting with this is that I think it may solve the same problems that I have, but it also adds HDMI, which I tested last night, as well as Ethernet. So it kind of makes it easier for me to integrate it with some other things. And so I'm still tooling with it. I don't have a certain go-to yet for this kind of thing. Nick Batt, who sometimes listens to our show, was really the inspiration for me to I got to think harder about it because he and I were talking about what he was bringing to NAMM, and I was like, I'm not playing hard enough when I saw Nick's kit. So that's what that's what kind of inspired me. But outside of that, I have been just kind of scanning other people's. I have a tendency to, when I'm in kind of absorption mode, is I'm watching things very fast. I'm often skipping because people talk too much between things for me. And so I just am skipping to try to see what they're doing. And then I move on to something else. And I don't really spend enough time with the video to oftentimes absorb even who they are. So I know that sounds bad, but that's how I tend to, when I'm trying to figure something out, I tend to go through content really fast. Next question.
Another question from Rayon Smith in Trinidad, West Indies. He says, do you guys have a great low-cost solution for digital signage?
Go ahead, Courtney.
You know what I used to use a lot in Playback? It depends on how if you just want something to put up that will loop a video all day long, 24/7 or something like that. I use these media players that you can get pretty cheap. K-World is the ones I used to use, but they don't make them anymore. Here's one on Amazon that's a HDMI media player. It's just a tiny little box. It has HDMI out, 1080p, and AV out if you have an old television set with baseband video. And you can set these up usually to you put your media onto a USB thumb drive or a small thumb drive or an SD card. Some of them take micro SD cards. And you set them up to just play automatically when the power's on, and you can shut the power off without any fear of corrupting media. You don't have an operating system to boot. They do run on Linux. So that's a pretty simple way. Their Bright Sign, of course, makes digital signage stuff that you can access over the internet so that you can upload new files to remotely, et cetera, and set up a kiosk or something remotely that can just run digital signage information that can be updated on a regular basis. I also use a lot of these Melees stick PCs. They're handy. They run Windows, so any type of media software that you can set to loop continuously, and you can access these, of course, remotely because they have Ethernet connection on them, and you could download new media into them remotely over VLAN, which is another thing that I use for remote. And these are about $200. The media player only that I just showed you, you can get them for around $30 to $50, some in that range.
Yeah, and I asked Phil Langer about this a couple of years ago because I was really thinking, or maybe a year or two ago, because I was really trying to think about how we do this for after hours and other things like that. And some of the ones that he had suggested. Phil Langer, by the way, manages a lot of the screens for the Times Square. So he's thinks about digital signage a lot. And he said that playsignage.com is one to look at. Another one is I think the one that he pays a lot of attention to is I think he uses is sedna.de. So sedna.de. Now these might not be the inexpensive ones, but this is but if you just want to know what the pros are using there. But again, another I think that's one possibility. It depends on what you need out of the signage. I know that the BBC for a while was just using Quartz Composer to do all those at the end of every hour when you see those when you see the dynamic information there. I think that was all done with Quartz Composer. So all the temperatures of different cities. Another one to look at is PlayOutB. JJ suggested it. PlayOutB by our own Jonas Dattel has you can have that play out. I've had PlayOutB play for weeks, so that'll run off a Raspberry Pi or a small Melee, and it'll just keep looping, and it's stable, and it could be what you need there. One that I have a tendency to use when we're just trying to throw something up is that we build them in Keynote and just let them run out. If we have a Mac Mini, we just have Keynote there, and it just does what it needs to do. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to show you. This is I have a couple of these BrightSign. BrightSign makes digital signage players, and they have a variety of different players with different resolutions and connectivity on them, and they're designed specifically for digital signage. So that's a good company to look at for sources for relatively cheap signage plan.
Next question.
Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota says, are there any of the compact PCs that will run vMix?
I don't, so David Brady suggests LZX Industries and/or one. So that's that. And I'm going to leave it to David to answer that question. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I have not tried them, but their B-Link does make some. If you can find one that can accommodate an RTX chipset, that's a possibility. They do make some fairly powerful compact PCs that are about the 5-inch square form factor that have Ryzen 7s in them and enough computing power and ATI, chipsets as far as their graphics go that can probably handle vMix. I'm not sure what the hardware requirements are on vMix. Do you know offhand, Alex?
I think the big thing is that you need an NVIDIA card. Chad pointed out vMix is optimized to run on NVIDIA GPUs. So when you think about what you need to buy, you need to be thinking about how it's going to work with an NVIDIA card. And NVIDIA card it is a very different way of approaching GPUs than others. And so oftentimes developers will lean towards one or the other. Next question.
From Zach Stallsmith in St. Paul, Minnesota. Let's see. Zach, there it goes. Okay. I'm working with a DALL-E 3, and it keeps signing me out in the middle of my sessions. Does this happen to anyone else? Not to me.
I have not had that happen, but I have to admit that I use I don't use it that heavily. Like I go to ChatGPT and I make some requests and then I go back to what I'm doing. So maybe it's that you're running a longer session. I haven't had that problem. Usually I come back to ChatGPT and I'm still logged in from weeks ago. But maybe you're doing too many requests. I think there's a limit. If you're on the free one, there is a limit to the number of questions you can ask before it's going to dump you out. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to say that they list 30 interactions with the same chat subject. And I use Microsoft Copilot which uses DALL-E 3 as its image generator. So it depends on and Microsoft has been jumping all around on their subscription models and charges anywhere from $4 an hour to $30 a month to, it changes about every 3 weeks. So there is a free version that's built into a Microsoft Edge browser that you can always access for free. And that's the one that I use. So I don't pay attention to the others. And it can vary. It can take a long time to generate an image, or it can be pretty fast. It depends on how much traffic there is at that moment in time.
Next question.
Rian Smith in the Trinidad West Indies. Do you still think SketchUp is the best solution to draft out ideas for 3D, etc.?
Yeah, it's probably the most straightforward. It's just really fast. You can throw things together. And one of the big advantages you have with SketchUp is what's called the 3D warehouse. So built into the app, you can go to a web page and look at thousands and thousands of items like chairs and desks and everything else and just throw them in, and the interface is relatively straightforward. I think that there are, as far as, and this is building all kinds of different things. I think Courtney will have things around building specific objects. There's a lot of other ones that are available when we are laying things out like a space, not less. We find SketchUp's great. There's other things we might use for specific objects. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it depends on whether you're using something for a layout, architectural layout, a room layout, et cetera, or equipment layout, doing plots for lighting, et cetera. Or if you're talking about 3D, building 3D objects for 3D printing, I use Tinkercad, which is a very simple Boolean type object base. It gives you primitive 3D objects and you add them or subtract them using Booleans. Add or subtract one graphic object from another, and it's pretty simple. I've built everything I've designed and printed in 3D. I've used SketchUp. It's free. It's available. It's Autodesk product, so you can give that a look if that's what you're talking.
Next question
from David Brady in New York City. He says, saw an ad for Previs Pro the other day and was wondering if anyone has ever used it. Looks to have some Polycam-like functionality.
Previs Pro is, let's see what, I have to say that the newer Polycam stuff is just insanely cool. So, I'm David, I can tell you that I'm definitely going to download this and play with it. I will say that I'm going to make some quality assessments that I'm not sure if I trust them, because number one is they're using serif fonts, and number two is they're mixing serif and non-serif fonts in their website. Come on. So anyway, I'm sorry. I'm just going to make a bunch of decisions about that. I don't quite understand. They're not web designers. But I think that, I don't know. I mean, this looks like there's a lot of opportunity here. So I think that what they're going down the path of, and I definitely want to look at it, is seeing how they're putting together. I think that they're showing so many things at one time that I have a little concern that any of them will work well. I think that that's always the challenge here. But I'm always interested in more storyboarding and figuring those things out. And they've been around long enough that maybe they're able to make this work. So it'd be interesting. I think that some version of this is going to be important, so I think that as, figuring these things out, I think that we're about to explode in this area. Supreet Singh said, serif plus non-serif is sacrilege. Yeah, it is. It really is. And two fonts on the same website is usually problematic. So anyway, but I think that I think that Previs is going to be a big deal. It'll be really interesting to see what these guys are doing. So we'll want to test it. But again, I haven't seen anything, and these guys have been around for a while. I haven't seen anything. I think you're going to have to write almost everything from scratch, and I think you're going to have a really hard time, making it very cross-platform and making it work. This usually requires a lot of understanding whether it's Android or iOS. I guess they're only on the Apple Store, so they might have it there. So, but I think that.
It says only for Apple silicone. Silicone.
Yeah. And so you see it here.
Of course, I won't be using it because all my Macs are Intel.
But I think that I find it interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a. I think it looks like it's relatively new here. I mean, I want it to work. So. And this page looks great, which is the old page that I jumped onto. It says it's got a bunch of logos that are going by that said it's being used by them. We'll see if that's the truth. But this is where I think it could be really useful. Is being able to import a script, be able to do storyboards quickly, being able to figure those bits out. So when I look at it now, as you heard me be unsure because of their website, but you can see that these are some great, how it's setting this up to kind of lay this stuff out is actually a pretty, could be very useful, so I think that, And this is a lot of what you need to just do these storyboards. And so being able to move around them, set up cameras. I don't know. I think David may have found us another second hour somewhere in the future here. We'll save that and we'll reach out to them, see if we can't get them to come on and show it to us. Next question.
Next one comes in from Joaquin Matus in Imperial Valley, California. Curious if anyone has ever used Live Edit to script a multicam shows.
Live Edit to script multicam shows. Here, let me see if we can get to this here. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've definitely seen this. So I just didn't put the name together. So if I'm correct, what this does is this actually will tie in, and it's actually firing off all the commands. So you're building a show, and you really have designed, if I remember correctly, what this is it basically you're setting up the show, and this is how we're going to cut it. Now, what this requires, if I remember, this question came up relatively quickly here, so I'm dancing a little bit. But if this is what I remember looking at IBC a couple of years ago, what this does is you set up all your edits for your cameras and everything else. It means that everybody has to follow the script. So it means that your camera operators are not responding; they know where they need to be. That everyone's where they need to be and doing what they need to do. So for a highly scripted show, I'll be honest, I hate those kinds of shows. so the reason I don't pay much attention to it, I mostly want to see conversation. I want to see people going back and forth. I want to see things that feel live. If it's not going to be responsive, and it's just going to be like pre-done, I don't need it to be live. Now it is designed to have live things in between, and it'll have holes. And so the idea is, and I think programs like Eurovision use things like this where, there's a lot of discussion, but once they get into the performance, everything has been scripted, and everything is rehearsed, and everything is exactly where they want it to make that show go forward. No, next question.
Next one comes in from Evan Troxel in Talent, Oregon, where they're very talented, I guess. After installing NDI into OBS on Windows 11, there's no NDI source available in the sources area. There is an NDI output available in the pull-down, so it seems to have installed. Any ideas on how to get the input working?
There's no NDI. What JJ says here is to be sure to add both parts of the OBS NDI plugin. If you are on the 30 build, the process has simplified significantly, and be sure to have your firewall rules allowing for OBS NDI private network. Installing the NDI core tools package can make this process smooth. Got it running in about 30 computers in a small environment. Is NDI webcam working? So that's something to look at. Thanks, JJ. Next question.
Comes in from Kyle Harmon in Chicago, Illinois. He says, if you are a T-Mobile customer and haven't gotten your Eclipse glasses yet, will you be picking up a free pair from T-Mobile?
Well, makes sense. Remember that you can look at the sun during the eclipse. So if you just wait until right when it actually hits, if you're looking at a partial eclipse, you should definitely wear the glasses. But if you're waiting for the full eclipse, once it's passed and it's actually in the eclipse, you can actually look up at it without the glasses. In fact, you need to do it without the glasses. It won't be bright enough otherwise. But before that, you'll definitely need those glasses. And if you can get a free one from T-Mobile, I think that they're probably not taking any chances of screwing it up. So it's probably a safe place to get some glasses. Next question.
Comes from Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota. It says, what is the current weight of Alex's phone rig?
It depends. I haven't weighed it. I haven't really thought about it. I pick it up and go, yeah, I could carry that. That's the weight that it is. Yeah, I could run with that, and I might need a monopod or whatever. But I think it's about 10 or 15 pounds right now. So I think that's kind of the weight that it's sitting at right now.
10 or 15 pounds? That's a little workout to carry that around. You can need an easy rig to support that off a little bungee cord above your head.
Yeah. I've carried more.
Next question. Next one up is from Roz Humphreys in Kovacs, British Columbia. Alex, could you reiterate the best platform to develop or market USDZ? I've used MOTU on Apple Motion, just digging around for some more resources.
I think that the big thing is that I think the market is going to be many different things. I don't know if there's a specific great market yet that is is really going to blow the doors off of everything. But I do think that USDZ is, if what I'm looking for personally is clip art for Keynote that does all the things that I want it to do. So so I want clip art to be phones and people and things, and have them all well formed, have them all kind of look like they belong together, and have them all able to be used in like in Keynote and Motion and Final Cut. And I think that clip art could be valuable. It's hard because people will, of course, pirate it because there's no way to really protect it. So I think that's part of the thing that maybe keeps people from doing that. But I think that it is I really think that there's a market there, and I just, it hasn't been opened up yet. But and I don't know how big that market is. But I think that that's something that wants to happen. And I think that we'll eventually see that. The hard part you get into is without being able to protect the content itself, it's hard to get people to invest in it. And that's the challenge. Next question.
Next question comes in from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. Says, I'm having trouble getting my PTZ Optics cameras to focus on the subject when using auto tracking. Do I need to have them stand still while I set up the auto tracker, or is there a step I'm missing to do this? Camera spins around its axis when enabled.
Well, it should. So when you enable it, the camera should always spin around. That's telling you that the PTZ is working. So that's normal. I don't know enough about PTZ optics to know how the auto tracking works. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, maybe it detects movement in a static frame. It holds still and then it looks for movement and it goes, that must be what I'm supposed to track. So if you have the person standing still and it can't detect anything moving, it may not know what to focus on, since it's designed to follow someone around and focus on that person. With its PTZ optics, you might have the person walk back and forth so it can detect the moving object in the frame. So then it can select that and lock onto it to track for focus. That's just my suggestion.
Next question.
From Joaquin Matus in Imperial Valley says, why are there multiple directors in a single series of episodic television? Well, I can answer.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, because episodic television is shot back to back. You're shooting one episode for 4 or 5 days, and then you go on to the next episode. And they cycle directors because a director won't have time to prep the next episode if he's working on shooting the current episode. And a lot of times these episodes don't come out till they don't finish writing them till a week before you have to shoot them. So it's quite difficult sometimes to prep them ahead of time. So that's why they have multiple directors. And a lot of times they will have 2 directors that switch off, that alternate, while one is shooting, the other's prepping the next episode, and so on. That's why there are multiple directors in a single series of episodic television, simply because of the shooting schedule.
Thanks to the panelists for being here. It was great to have us, a handful of us here today. Thanks to everyone asking all the questions here and keeping things going. And thanks to the incredible team on the back end making all of this possible. It does take a lot of people to make this work every single day, and we appreciate everybody's contribution to this process. We traveled 100. Wow, we traveled a lot today. It was a very, very busy day for the planes. We traveled 113,000 miles today, 181,000 kilometers, and that is 891 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go. Let's jump into after hours.
Well, we made it most of the way through. Yeah.
So I was like,
ask
more questions. I'm like, there's 2 of us. Don't ask more questions.
Yeah.
It's like,
oh, that's a good question. Well, luckily you were monitoring the chat, so that's good.
Yeah. That was good. That made it easier. So it was good work. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Tomorrow's audio day. We usually have a little better turnout.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Thanks.
See you. Bye-bye.